he stole it. He'd stolen it, And I did the whole number, man. Go back and apologize, return it. I'll never steal again, that kind of.
By the mid-1970s, the Partridge Family had become a television sensation, with millions tuning in every week to watch America's favorite musical family. But while the show seemed picture-perfect to viewers, Shirley Jones was quietly facing a very different reality. Scripts that once celebrated the entire cast had begun to focus almost entirely on David Cassidy, leaving the rest of the ensemble, including Shirley herself, sidelined. Behind the laughter and catchy songs, tensions were building, and the atmosphere on set was changing in ways she could no longer ignore. For decades, Shirley stayed silent about the real story, allowing fans to believe she simply moved on to new opportunities. But now, at 91 years old, she is finally pulling back the curtain and revealing the truth about why she walked away from one of the most beloved shows in television history. And it is not what you might expect. When The Partridge Family premiered in September of 1970, no one could have predicted just how quickly it would explode into a cultural phenomenon. The bright, feel-good stories, the impossibly catchy songs, and the vibrant, almost dreamlike aesthetic made it a fixture in living rooms across America. Families would gather each week to watch the widowed Shirley Partridge, played by Shirley Jones, guide her 5 children through life's ups and downs, all while performing together as a traveling musical group. The role was a natural fit for Shirley. With a background in both acting and singing, and an Academy Award already to her name, she brought warmth, elegance, and credibility to the part. The early days on set felt magical. There was a true sense of camaraderie among the cast, from the youngest members like Susan Day and Danny Bonaduce to the breakout teen idol David Cassidy. They were not just playing a family. In those first seasons, they genuinely felt like one. Between takes, laughter filled the soundstage, and even the long hours of rehearsals for the musical numbers felt rewarding. The show's producers seemed committed to creating something wholesome yet entertaining, and Shirley believed she had found a role that blended her personal values with her professional talents. The music, performed both on and off screen, became a phenomenon of its own. Songs like "I Think I Love You" topped charts worldwide, and the cast found themselves not only acting, but becoming unexpected pop stars. Concert tours, fan letters by the thousands, and constant media appearances meant the show was more than a job. It was a cultural wave that swept them all along. Shirley took pride in how the show portrayed a single mother leading her children with love and resilience, a positive image at a time when television rarely celebrated such family dynamics. For Shirley, those early years represented the ideal balance between art and enjoyment. The workload was heavy, but it was matched by the joy of seeing fans connect with the show's heart. She loved watching the younger cast members grow, both in their roles and in real life, and she cherished the energy they brought to every scene. The creative team seemed open to collaboration, and scripts reflected a genuine ensemble approach, giving every character their moment to shine. But success has a way of changing the dynamics behind the scenes. As ratings soared and certain cast members became household names, subtle shifts began to emerge. Shirley noticed small changes in the scripts, the focus of storylines, and even the way the cast interacted off-camera. At first, these changes felt like the natural evolution of a hit series, but they would soon become the first warning signs of a much bigger shift, one that would eventually make Shirley question her place in the show she helped make iconic. By the time the second season of The Partridge Family rolled around, the tone on set had started to change in ways that were hard to ignore. What had once been an equal celebration of every character was beginning to tip heavily in one direction. The scripts, which had previously given each family member their own small arcs, began to focus more and more on David Cassidy's character, Keith Partridge. For the network, it made perfect business sense. David had become a teen idol almost overnight, gracing the covers of every major magazine, selling out concert venues, and pulling in ratings that rivaled the biggest shows on television. But for Shirley Jones, the shift felt like the start of an imbalance that was eating away at the heart of the show. It was not jealousy. Shirley adored David and was immensely proud of his success. In fact, she often defended him against the pressures of sudden stardom. knowing firsthand how brutal the entertainment industry could be. But she could not ignore that the family dynamic, which was the soul of the series, was slowly being replaced by a one-man spotlight. Scenes that once explored the mother's perspective or showcased the younger kids were being trimmed or cut entirely. The storylines became predictable, revolving around Keith's romantic mishaps or his rise as a pop sensation. The deeper, more meaningful family themes were starting to disappear. Behind the scenes, the production schedule grew more grueling. Between filming the series, recording albums, and accommodating David's concert tours, the show's pace was relentless. Shirley noticed the toll it was taking on everyone, especially David, who was juggling his role as both a fictional and real-life teen idol. While the producers pushed harder to capitalize on his popularity, Shirley worried about burnout, both for him and for the integrity of the series itself. The mood on set reflected the shift. The once light-hearted atmosphere was now tinged with tension. Some of the younger cast members felt overshadowed, unsure where their place was in the evolving storylines. Crew members quietly noted the changes in tone, and Shirley began hearing murmurs of frustration. She tried to keep the peace, remaining the steady, motherly figure she had been from the start, but deep down, she could feel that the family they had built, both on screen and off, was slowly fracturing. Still, Shirley hoped that with the right conversations, the balance could be restored. She believed in the show's original vision and wanted to fight for it. But the network had discovered the goldmine of David Cassidy's fame, and once television executives smell profit, reversing course is rarely an option. What Shirley did not realize at the time was that the imbalance she was noticing was only the beginning. The changes were about to accelerate in ways that would push her patience and her loyalty to the limit. By the time the show reached its fourth season in 1974, Shirley Jones could no longer ignore the growing cracks in its foundation. The scripts, once rich with heart and humor, were becoming formulaic. Episodes that had once balanced the voices of the entire Partridge family were now almost exclusively centered around Keith's charm, Keith's troubles, or Keith's latest love interest. Shirley's role had been reduced to delivering brief lines of motherly advice before stepping aside to make room for yet another storyline tailored to David Cassidy's appeal. For an actress of her caliber, with decades of experience, the creative limitations were both frustrating and disheartening. Worse still, the light-hearted family atmosphere behind the scenes had all but vanished. The pressure to maintain ratings and to keep feeding the David Cassidy phenomenon had turned the set into a place where tension simmered just below the surface. The younger cast members, particularly Susan Dey and Danny Bonaduce, were beginning to feel invisible. Scripts that could have deepened their characters were either watered down or scrapped altogether. Conversations that once revolved around creative ideas now centered on merchandising opportunities and fan demographics. Shirley also began to see the toll it was taking on David himself. His grueling schedule left him physically and emotionally drained. Between filming the show, recording albums, and performing live concerts, he was running on fumes. Shirley, fiercely protective of her stepson in real life, worried about what the industry was doing to him. Yet any attempt to slow down the pace was met with resistance from producers and network executives who were unwilling to let their golden goose rest. Privately, Shirley began to question what she was really staying for. The work no longer felt fulfilling, and the creative spark that had drawn her to the series had been replaced by a rigid formula. Even the music, once fresh and exciting, was starting to feel repetitive. She would come home from long filming days and feel a heaviness she had never experienced before in her career, a sense that the joy had been drained from something she once loved deeply. The breaking point came during a script meeting late in the season. Shirley brought up concerns about the direction of the show, suggesting ways to reintroduce the ensemble feel and give other characters more meaningful arcs. Her suggestions were politely dismissed, with the implication that the formula was working and did not need fixing. It was in that moment Shirley realized that the heart of the Partridge family, the thing that made it special, was no longer the priority. The network had made its choice, and now she would have to make hers. Leaving would not be easy. It meant stepping away from a steady paycheck, millions of adoring fans, and a show that had become part of television history. but Shirley knew that staying would mean sacrificing her own creative integrity. And that was a price she was no longer willing to pay. What she did not anticipate was how her departure would intertwine with David Cassidy's own growing disillusionment, setting the stage for the end of an era. While Shirley Jones was facing her own frustrations, David Cassidy's personal battles were becoming harder to hide. To millions of fans, he was the ultimate teen idol, selling out stadiums, topping the charts, and appearing on magazine covers across the world. But behind the glittering image, David was trapped in a grueling cycle that left no room for rest, privacy, or a normal life. Days were spent filming The Partridge Family. Nights and weekends were swallowed by concert tours, and whatever time remained was filled with photo shoots, press interviews, and endless fan commitments. Shirley, having weathered the highs and lows of Hollywood herself, could read the signs of burnout. There were days he arrived on set, visibly drained, running on little more than coffee and adrenaline, yet still expected to bring the same charm and energy that made him famous. When the cameras stopped, the demands continued. No downtime, no chance to catch his breath. It was not just physical exhaustion. David felt trapped in Keith Partridge's shadow, his real self hidden behind a carefully crafted image. Fans adored the wholesome, easygoing persona they saw on television, but David longed for more challenging, mature roles. The problem was that the same industry that had built his fame was determined to keep him in the mold that guaranteed ratings and record sales. Shirley watched with growing concern. She admired his ability to keep showing up despite the pressure. She also knew he was being pushed beyond his limits. Her efforts to shield him from the more exploitative aspects of the business were no match for the machine driving his career. The strain began to bleed into the atmosphere on set. The once light-hearted environment grew heavier as David's fatigue, occasional irritability, and resentment toward the show's creative constraints became more visible. For Shirley, it was clear they were both fighting parallel battles. She for creative fulfillment, he for personal freedom. This unspoken bond deepened her resolve. She could not watch someone she cared about be worn down without questioning her own place in the show. What neither of them knew was that their shared discontent was setting the stage for major change. The network's grip was strong, but cracks were forming. And the moment those cracks gave way, the impact would be felt by everyone involved. By the middle of the fourth season, Shirley Jones knew she had reached her limit. The show she had once been proud to call home had shifted from a warm, ensemble story to a vehicle almost entirely centered on David Cassidy's popularity. While she respected his talent and understood the business logic, she could not ignore how much the focus had drained the heart from the series and pushed her character into the background. Episodes went by where she had little more than a few brief lines, and for an actress who had built her career on layered, meaningful performances, it was both frustrating and disheartening. Her choice to leave was not solely about her own role. Shirley could see the exhaustion weighing on David, who was quietly expressing his own desire to step away from the pressures of being a teen idol. In their private conversations, there was a shared understanding. Both were ready for something different. With her contract ending, Shirley made the deliberate decision not to renew. It was not a dramatic walkout, but a quiet stand for her self-respect and creative integrity. The network tried to tempt her with promises of more balanced scripts and bigger moments, but she had been in the industry long enough to recognize empty reassurances. The show's formula was locked in, and she had no interest in watching the same cycle repeat. When her decision became known, reactions on set were mixed. Some were disappointed, while others understood completely. For Shirley, it was bittersweet. She cared deeply for her castmates, especially the younger actors she had watched grow up. But she also knew that staying too long risked eroding not only her passion for acting, but also the respect she had for herself as an artist. What she could not have predicted was that her exit would also influence David's. Soon after, he too would decide it was time to move on, and together, their departures would mark the beginning of the end for the Partridge family. When Shirley Jones's decision to leave became official, it was as if the air shifted on set. For 4 seasons, she had been the glue holding the Partridge family together, both on and off screen. Her departure was not the kind of drama that made tabloid headlines, but those who worked closely with her knew what it meant. The soul of the show was leaving, Not long after, David Cassidy made it clear that he too was ready to move on. The combination of losing its maternal anchor and its breakout star was a blow the series could not recover from. The announcement was handled quietly, but the ripple effect was immediate. Fans had grown deeply attached to Shirley's warm, grounding presence and David's youthful energy. Without them, the Partridge family would have lost its identity. Executives weighed the idea of continuing with replacements or shifting the format, but even they understood that the magic of the show was tied directly to the chemistry of its original cast. By the end of the fourth season, the decision was made. There would be no fifth. In the years that followed, Shirley looked back on her time with the show with mixed emotions. She remained proud of what they had created in those early seasons: the joy, the music, the sense of family that resonated with millions of viewers. She also valued the relationships she had built, many of which endured long after the cameras stopped rolling, but she never regretted walking away. The choice had preserved her love for performing and allowed her to move on to roles that challenged her in new ways. David's own departure mirrored her reasoning in many ways. He had grown weary of being locked into the image of Keith Partridge and wanted to explore new creative directions. Like Shirley, he carried fond memories of the show, but also a clear understanding of why it could not last. Fame had been both a gift and a cage, and leaving the Partridge family was his way of reclaiming his freedom. Even decades later, fans still approached Shirley with heartfelt gratitude for the role she played in their lives. She understood the nostalgia because she felt it too, but she also knew that the magic they remembered was tied to a very specific moment in time. Trying to force it to last longer would have only diluted it. By leaving when she did, she ensured that the Partridge family would be remembered in its brightest light, rather than in a slow, drawn-out decline. Now, at 91, Shirley speaks about her decision with a calm certainty. Time has only reinforced what she felt then, that knowing when to walk away is just as important as knowing when to say yes. For her, the end of the Partridge family was not a loss. It was a turning point. It marked the close of one chapter and the start of another, and it left behind a legacy that, half a century later, still makes people smile. When Shirley Jones stepped away from the Partridge family, she did not retreat from the spotlight. She simply redirected it. Free from the rigid schedule of a weekly sitcom, she began taking on projects that reignited her passion for acting. She returned to her theatrical roots, performing in stage productions that allowed her to showcase her powerful singing voice and dramatic range. She also began accepting more diverse film and television roles, determined not to be defined solely by her years as America's television mom. Shirley's post-Partridge career proved just how versatile she was. She appeared in dramas, comedies, and musicals, bringing the same level of dedication to each role that had earned her an Academy Award years before. Audiences who had grown up watching her on the colorful Partridge set were often surprised to see her take on edgier or more complex parts, but Shirley embraced the chance to show new sides of herself as a performer. Her personal life also flourished in the years that followed. She continued to be a devoted mother and stepmother, maintaining a close relationship with David Cassidy, even after their time on the show ended. Their bond, strengthened by the unique pressures they had shared, lasted through the highs and lows of both their lives. Shirley also became an in-demand guest on talk shows and nostalgic television specials, often reflecting on her career with warmth and humor, even when discussing the challenges she faced. As the decades passed, the Partridge family retained a special place in her heart, but she never felt the urge to dwell on what might have been if she had stayed. In her mind, leaving when she did had allowed her to preserve the best memories of the series: the laughter in the early seasons, the thrill of the music, and the joy of connecting with fans. By stepping away on her own terms, she had ensured those memories would remain untarnished. In interviews, Shirley often shared advice for younger performers navigating the entertainment industry. Know your worth, protect your creative integrity, and never be afraid to walk away from something that no longer serves you. It was a philosophy she had lived by, and it had guided her through one of the toughest decisions of her career. Now, at 91, she speaks with the clarity that only time can bring. She is proud of the legacy she built, not just as an actress, but as a woman who made choices that honored her own happiness. For Shirley Jones, life after the Partridge family was not a quiet fade into the background. It was proof that endings are simply the doorway to new beginnings, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is close a chapter before someone else writes the ending for you.